the mind starts to change, then it became manifest with the confusing of the languages. We talked about that though. Let's keep it going. Verse 25 again. Who changed the truth of Elohim into a lie and worshipped and served the creature. Now see, when it says that, what you'll find is that it represents creation. Don't think about in the context of just they worship man, they worship birds, they worship the four-footed beasts, etc., etc. The idea is that they worship the creation. But here's the thought. Let's open that up a little bit more. You know what the creation is that they worship? They worship this created being, the opponent. You were perfect in the day that you were created, until iniquity was found in you. Okay? That's the creation or the creature that every human being is worshiping. If you're worshiping a man, you're worshiping the opponent. If you're worshiping an animal, you're worshiping the opponent. If you're worshiping yourself, you're worshiping the opponent. Verse 25. Who changed the truth of Elohim into a lie and worshiped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. Now let's tie that up. Let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 20, which reads, but I say that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, hold up. Why do I say don't interact with these people unless they're coming over to your covenant? Because I already know what they worship and what they serve. It's not me. They worship and serve the opponent. So no, I don't want you to get ensnared by whatever they're practicing. I don't even want you to ask about what they're practicing. It's abominable to me. Why? Because they're worshiping the opponent. That's why. They're not worshiping me. They turned their backs to me. So he had Brother Shaul right. But I say that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to demons. People got this idea, well, there's only one God. It is only one true God, but the same prophet, Brother Shaul, he said, there are gods many and there are lords many, but to us there's only one. And when he says to us, he's talking about Israel. But to Israel, there's only one mighty one. But to the rest of the world, there are gods many and lords many. So what they say, it's only one God, and they basically believe you can call him whatever you want to call him and address him however you want to address him, and you can render whatever kind of worship you want to render. Abba said, I don't accept everything. It's different. He says, but I say that the things what the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to demons and not to Elohim. And I don't desire that you would have fellowship with demons. Now let's tie that up with Revelation chapter 13, verses 3 and 4, which that's going to be part of. And all the world wondered after the beast, and they worshipped the dragon, which gave power to the beast. All the world worshipped the dragon. All the world worshipped the dragon. All the world worshipped the dragon. We all fell into that category at some point until those who are now on this side were awakened. Let's go back to Romans chapter 1. 26. For this cause Elohim gave them up unto vile affections. For even their women did change their natural use into that which is against nature. Keep in mind, the reason why this happened is because they changed the glory of the uncorruptible Elohim into an image. They changed the truth of Elohim into a lie. And as a result, for this cause, this is what he's saying, Elohim gave them up unto vile affections. For even their women did change the natural use into that which is against nature. Shema Yisrael. And likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust one toward another. Men with men, working that which is unseemly, and receiving in themselves that recompense of their error which was meet. And even as they did not like to retain Elohim in knowledge, Elohim gave them over to a reprobate mind to do those things which are not convenient. That word reprobate, we want to take a look at that. That's our only word for today. Greek lexicon number 96, adokimos, which means without acceptance. It says unapproved, that is rejected, by implication worthless. Why? Because they are unaccepted. Now listen to what happens starting in verse 29. And what you're going to find is that these traits here are reminiscent of the works of the flesh. Maybe worded a little different, but it's the exact same thing. Let me start at verse 28. And even as they did not like to retain Elohim in knowledge, Elohim gave them over to a reprobate mind to do those things which are not convenient, being filled with all unrighteousness, fornication, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, debate, deceit, malignity, whisperers, backbiters, haters of Elohim, despiteful, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, without understanding, covenant breakers, without natural affection, implacable, unmerciful, who, knowing the judgment of Elohim, that they which commit such things are worthy of death, not only do the same, but have pleasure in them that do them. You hear that? They don't just do it, they have pleasure in other people that do the same thing. In other words, birds of a feather flock together. That's what he's talking about. So, and all that we're talking about, okay, what does this have to do with anything, right? Human nature. But listen to this. What is a social construct? I'm going to touch on a couple other things now. What is a social construct? Let me check my time real quick again. Okay. Got some information I want to read and I'm almost done. What is social construct? One way humans create social constructs is by structuring what they see and experience into categories. Okay? For example, they see people with different skin colors and other physical features and create the social construct of race. Now, this comes from what it says from verywellmind.com. Okay, this is just giving you an idea. This is what we do as human beings. We categorize things. It's a blessing and a curse. You know, it's a blessing and a curse. But here's the curse part of it. Because you have some people throwing this around, social construct. They believe everything that has been established in the world, right? Anything that is used to regulate and to maintain some type of order, they say it's all a social construct. Man created these things. See, here's the one thing that man didn't create. Man didn't create this. Like, I heard somebody talking the other day, it was on a video I was watching, and this was a woman. And she was expressing, why do I need to get a piece of paper in order to be in a relationship with somebody? The government created marriage. Wrong answer there. The government did not create marriage. And it depends on what you believe. Again, see, if you are of the belief that there's no higher power, no supreme being, of course you're going to believe that the government created marriage. But if you believe in Holy Scripture, we know that that first man and that first woman were brought together by the Most High. You see, what Yah has brought together, let no man bring asunder. Marriage is a holy institution. It's a biblical institution. So my question then for the atheists and agnostics who get married, how is it that you're getting married when that's a biblical institution? But anyway, you get my point. Next excerpt. It says, social constructionism is the theory that people develop knowledge of the world in a social context, and that much of what we perceive as reality depends on shared assumptions. From a social constructionist perspective, many things we take for granted and believe are objective reality are actually socially constructed and thus can change as society changes. Listen to that. Hasn't things changed? There was a time frame when there were certain ways of life that were prohibited. And I'm talking about by civil law. It was against civil law to practice certain things. But now, as society changes, so does the law change. Okay? The theory of social constructionism was introduced in the 1966 book, The Social Construction of Reality. See, there's so much. When you go back and there's a process, see, like I was saying, we're born into this world system, right? All of these things are set and they already in motion. They're already in motion. So when you go back to this time frame, now there's this idea about social constructionism. So now that that's a big thing, look at what they say today, social constructionism. So let's change what we're the ones who made these rules. We're the ones who made these laws. Let's change them to be whatever we want them to be. Now what's happening is you got a younger generation coming up. A younger generation. One of the sisters reminded us of something that our beloved rabbi mentioned years ago. And you know what that was? That at some point they will change the Constitution. So the younger generation is like, we don't need that. We don't need the Constitution anymore. You got the old heads who want to hold on to it. Then the new generation coming up, they're going to make some changes. They want to do things differently, based on this idea of social constructionism. But see, no matter what they do, see, this is what people don't understand. You can't change this. And he told us that. You know how he told us that? He said in Daniel chapter 7, verse 25, talking about this little horn, right? Who would speak great words against the Most High, right? Wear out the saints of the Most High. And think to change times and laws. You think you're changing it, but the word of Abba still going to stand. The same words you think change, guess what? When you close those eyes and when you stand before the judgment, those very same words you thought you changed will judge you. You thought you changed something, but you didn't. The word of Yah is forever settled in the heaven. Man can't touch it. You can erase and change names in the physical book all you want. The master is still in the heavens and man can't touch it. You can't put your hands on it. But you think you altering something down here. You may alter something in the physical world, but that's why once you got the mind of the Spirit and you connected to the Most High by the Torah, you know what the truth is. You can see, because you don't see the way the carnal mind sees anymore. You see it like the Creator sees. You have now adopted His eyesight. You've adopted His ears, His hearing. That's what's happening. You're adopting His smell, His taste, His touch, everything. We're changing. That's why He says, let this mind be in you. What mind? This mind. That's what the purpose of receiving Ruach HaKodesh is, to adapt and change to that mind, the transforming. Be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed. Don't be conformed, be transformed. How? By the renewing of your mind. How? By receiving Ruach HaKodesh. That's how. Now let's move on. It's important though. The theory of social constructionism was introduced in the 1966 book, The Social Construction of Reality, by sociologists Peter L. Berger and Thomas Luckman. Berger and Luckman's ideas were inspired by a number of thinkers, including Karl Marx, look him up, Emil Durkheim, look him up, George Herbert Mead, look these people up. Karl Marx, Emil Durkheim, George Herbert Mead. In the late 1960s, 3 separate intellectual movements came together to form the foundation of social constructionism. The first was an ideological movement that questioned social realities and put a spotlight on the political agenda behind such realities. The second was a literary rhetorical drive to deconstruct language and the way it impacts our knowledge of reality. And the third was a critique of scientific practice led by Thomas Kuhn, who argued that scientific findings are influenced by and thus representative of the specific communities where they're produced rather than objective reality. So what you have is a dividing of the mind. That's all you have. When you understand the idea of divide and conquer, people focus so much on the dividing the people. But see, in order to divide the people, you got to divide their mind and how they think. That's where the division happened first. Your mind has to be divided. It has to be fragmented. And then you can be manipulated. See, pay attention. Suggestion, conditioning. Keep these things in mind. We do these in segments. And the hope is that when you're looking at the different segments, Abba is able by his spirit to help you to link all these segments so that you can see the bigger picture. Now, all that I just read, it comes from www.thoughtco.com under What is Social Construct? Okay? So the next thing you want to look at is social movements and their impact. Okay? Now, this first one, it says, social movement, a loosely organized but sustained campaign in support of a social goal, typically either the implementation or the prevention of a change in society structure or values. Let me read that again. Social movement, a loosely organized but sustained campaign in support of a social goal, typically either the implementation of or the prevention of a change in society structure or values. So social movements have a purpose. Okay? Although social movements differ in size, they are all essentially collective. That is, they result from the more or less spontaneous coming together of people whose relationships are not defined by rules and procedures, but who merely share a common outlook on society. Birds of a feather flock together. Collective behavior in crowds, panics, and elementary forms are of brief duration or episodic and are guided largely by impulse. When short-lived impulses give way to long-term aims, and when sustained association takes the place of situational groupings of people, the result is a social movement. Think about that. Okay? All of these different things that's happening in our world today, there's a reasoning behind that. And it's tied and connected to our human nature. Okay? And this excerpt comes from Britannica.com under the article Social Movement. And I have one more excerpt here. The contradictions, such as social inequality, that are built into arrangements of power create discontent. One result is social movements. Large numbers of people who organize to promote or resist social change. To promote or to resist social change. Members of social movements hold strong ideas about what is wrong with the world or some part of it, and how to make things right. Examples include the civil rights movement. Now, when you hear some of these movements, some people go to this and say, there was nothing wrong with this, there's nothing wrong with that. But you're missing the point. It's what I'm going to say. The civil rights movement, the white supremacist movement, the women's movement, the animals' rights crusade, the nuclear freeze movement, the environmental movement. These are just examples of social movements, right? But look at what happens as a result, number one. But the second point is, with these different movements, it may be showing one thing as the face of it, but oftentimes there's some hidden agendas that we don't know about. So people may think they're talking about civil rights. Civil rights eventually became human rights. Human rights then became a person has the right to choose to do whatever with whoever, however they want to do it. So now there's a move for some very corrupt things in the world today, under the guise of human rights, which was promulgated, and it was on the coattails of what was civil rights. So they took something that was actually happening to black folk, and not just to black folk, but it happened to us the most. And then they utilized this as the face. But they utilized it as the face because they knew that it was going to garner a lot of sympathy or empathy from other people. But on the coattails, and then what they say, the fine print, it was also inclusive of other things, like human rights. Okay? So there's this idea now that we as human beings have the right to do whatever it is that we want to do. But where did that idea come from? See? Where did it come from? That we got the right. And who says we have a right to do anything? That's where it's coming from. But it seems good. Remember in Revelation we came across this one part, and it talked about this beast, the second beast in Revelation chapter 13. It said it had two horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. See, the two horns like a lamb is symbolic of innocence, purity. But in actuality, it spoke like a dragon. So all of these different things that say, well, it seems right to, for a person to be able to make their own decision, do their own thing. And Allah even gives you free will. I'm going to give you a choice. You can choose the water or you can choose the fire. Whatever you choose, I'm going to give it to you. So if you want the fire, I don't want you to choose the fire. I want you to choose the water. But if you choose the fire, that's what you want. You sure? Okay, I'll give that to you. He lets you do that. See? But here's what the other side does. The other side says, this fire right here, this is actually the water. And this water right here, this is actually the fire. You don't want that water. You don't want that water. You want this fire right here. But the good has been called bad and the bad has been called good. That's what's happening in our world today. Okay? So, one last point. When it comes to the opponent versus the Most High or Yahweh, you have the mind of the flesh versus the mind of the spirit. You have the hedonism, materialism, and intellectualism versus the Torah. Then you have the works of the flesh. So if the works of the flesh talks about what's going on the other side, what is the contrast? The fruit of the Spirit. See? When you get to the works of the flesh, because you functioning and operating in the mind of the flesh, this is what's going to be made manifest. But if you live and you function by the mind of the Spirit, it is the fruit of the Spirit that will be manifest. Listen what it says. Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 and 23. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faith, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. Because you're functioning now, when you talk about the fruit of the Spirit, this is the character of Yahweh Elohim. This is character. And that's how you're living. That's biblical lifestyle. When you're manifesting the characteristics of the fruit of the Spirit